Buddy, Coach Lorri here. I'm going to center myself. Um, Along with one of our athletes from Team Wilpers, Brent Hecker. So, Brent, thanks for joining me today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me here, Lorri. Appreciate the invite.
Yeah, when Brent logged in, he was upside down. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Is he doing this intentionally, or are we going to? Yeah, we fixed it. So we solved all our tech issues. We're always good with that. Hi, Amy. How are your legs feeling? And for those of you who don't know, and I still remember the race name, I don't even have to look at it because it's funny. The Chuckanut 50. So 50K, first ultra race. She finished, which is awesome.
Yeah.
I know.
She
Super
did
proud.
awesome. My
Yeah.
wife and I were watching it last weekend, and it kind of felt like mildly stalkerish because the videos kept popping up every once in a while. We're like, is this okay that we're mildly stalking Amy as she's going through the 50K? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
it's awesome.
It's interesting when I have lots of friends who post trackers for bigger races, like 500-mile road races or Ironman or that kind of thing. And once in a while, I'll check in. I've watched Matt a couple of times when he's run various marathons. In New York, it was New York, yeah, last year where it got so hot and he kind of melted down around mile 13. I was like, what happened? And I could tell, and you can't. It's not like you're getting commentary from the athletes, but you can kind of see what's going on. So it was very interesting. But everybody else melted down too because it was really hot, which is not ideal for a running event. But, um, anyways, Brent's been on my radar for a while. He's very active in our Facebook group. We have chats for all the various time zones, and he joined all the chats, and he's always inviting people to ride with him and coffee rides. And he's totally stoked on training and riding. And also, you're doing Seattle to Portland this year, right?
Correct. Yeah. First year. So first year doing this, my wife was very nervous about it because I decided at the age of 46 to get into bike racing, and then second race she saw me hit the deck at 25 miles an hour and slide 30 feet. So and what she classified as the worst accident she's ever seen me have. So she was very hesitant on doing this, and I said, I'm going to get a group together. So we've got myself and 7 other coworkers. Are all going to pull together. We're going to stick together as a group. So we'll have our own little mini Peloton.
Nice.
And yeah, we'll do it in 2 days. We are a bunch of engineers, and none of us can decide where the halfway point's going to be. So my wife's following us. She'll have not all the way. She's going to be in the car, so she'll be our support and gear car. So that way they don't have to haul all their tents and everything. But she's like, okay, we're either stopping here and getting a hotel, or we're stopping 30 miles down the road and getting a hotel because there's nothing in between.
Yeah.
So we'll either do back to back. Yeah.
A lot of people do like 125 on the first day and then 75 or somewhere around there. They don't do exactly 100 and 100. And that makes sense, I think. You have a little more gas in the tank.
A little more on day 1, a little less on day 2. There are some people that'll go out and do it all in one day. So it's 210 miles. So
yes.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. It's relatively flat though, isn't it? Compared to a lot of events.
I've been examining the course map, and I think most of the hills are in the first part, but like the Seattle to Portland corridor is really flat, so it doesn't follow completely I-5. If you look at a map, it weaves a little bit. So actually, I was talking to Kapuna, our favorite Raquel, and we actually swing close to where she lives. She lives down in Lake Taft. So we've been having Amy Amy's also riding the Portland to Seattle, or Seattle to Portland also this year. So try and hook up with Amy and try and hook up with Raquel. Raquel's like, I'm too old to do that, but I'll see you guys somewhere around Puyallup. So
yeah, we'll send her a cowbell so she can cheer. So
perfect.
And you will find, you haven't done the event before?
No, I've not.
It's a big one.
Endurance and distance. So I'm really looking forward to that. But endurance sports has always been something that intrigued me, even as a kid in high school and things like that. So, but growing up in Ohio, like, you could ride 300 miles across the state and never see a hill. So
yes, and I did that. I rode from Rochester, New York to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Ohio made me very sad. It was beautiful. It was a lot of farmland. I couldn't find a coffee to, Because it's a lot of farmland. I remember coming around, and it's just fields and it's grids, and
Mhm.
coming around a turn, and there was one little building, and it was an ice cream shop, coffee shop. I taught them how to make an affogato. I was like, just take the shot and pour it over the ice cream. It was like an oasis. I was like, there was nothing around. It was just like there was a post office and this coffee shop, and I was very happy there. But yeah, very flat there.
Yeah, that might have
Definitely
been the
very
first,
flat.
last, and only time an affogato was ever served in Ohio.
I know. She didn't know what it was. She was like, "This is
I
great. It's like a root beer float, but with coffee." And I was like, "Yeah, just exactly like that, right? Drunken ice cream." Um, yes. So, hi Maggie. Pulliup. Pulliup is in Ohio or in Washington?
Puyallup is in Washington, so
Puyallup.
it's just south. Puyallup, yeah. There's one thing we got really used to. We moved here. We moved to Seattle in 2014 from Montana, and one thing that we got really used to in Montana was Flathead Indian tribes names, and then we moved here, and there's a Puyallup Indian tribe, the Snohomish Indian tribes, Squillagamish Indian tribe, and the state has really kept a lot of the city names are linked somehow to native names.
Mhm.
Our favorite one is actually spelled Sequim, and it's pronounced Squim, but it looks like Sequim,
Sequim. Yeah.
but Squim. So yeah,
Whereas further down on the coast, we have a lot of Mexican origin names as well. And I grew up in New York, where the Oneidas and the Onondagas and all those tribes as well. So let's go back. You were saying since high school, you've been interested in endurance sports. So talk about that a little bit. Did you participate in sport as a kid?
yeah. So growing up, I was in everything every season. My parents decided to keep me busy, which was probably a good thing. But then in high school, I was like, okay, I'm gonna try sprints. So I tried sprinting for my freshman sophomore year of high school.
In running?
Was not, yeah, like hey, let's do 200 because I don't want to run a mile, even though it was intriguing.
Yeah.
Was not good at it. And then a buddy of mine actually called me my before junior year and said, hey, why don't you try cross country? Your sprint times are one of those that like you're consistently at those targets, and you're not. And he goes, quite frankly, you're not any faster. So let's let's try something different. I Lorri, I will not forget my first practice, and I was about dead. It was all hills, and I think I lasted 20 minutes of the 45-minute practice. And the coach looked at me and said, "Okay, you probably need to stop right now." So, yeah, so good on him. I waited in the car. This is the mid '90s, so we didn't like stretch and do a lot of the stuff that we know
Right.
about now. And but then I think it was one of those like questions: is this guy going to come back or not? Because I think we killed him. And next day was back at it, and 6 weeks of training. Went out my first 5K cross country and cracked off 20:30, and
Wow.
I was like, and that was like the hook. So it was like, okay, I'm doing this. By the end of the season, I ran 19:13, and I was like, I'm done with sprints. I'm just doing distance.
Yeah.
Um, so distance track, and I was all reserve my junior year, and there were five of us when we got to the league meet, and they ran a reserve meet, and we look at us, and we're all running the mile, and we said, okay, Arby's has the 5 for 5 going on right now. We're going to call this the 5 under 5.
Yeah.
So there's exactly five of us in the reserve mile. First guy came across at 4:55, then 4:56, and two of us at 4:57.9, and then the last one was 4:58.9. So we're all reserve runners, and we're just like jumping up and down, going nuts, like we just won the league meet. Nope.
You won the Arby's
Uh,
sandwiches, right?
yeah, exactly. We won Arby's, so that was fun.
Um,
Um,
what is reserve? Those are so in a track meet, a winter track meet, they can allow, or spring too, right? You can allow a certain
Spring two.
number of athletes from each team. And so
Yeah, it's
reserve are the guys that aren't the A team.
yeah, the
Yeah.
reserves that like yeah, varsity. So varsity track is like distance is like two or three athletes, and that's
Mhm.
it. And then anybody else who wants to run, they'll have reserve. Now, the thing I like about track and cross country is it's always shifting. Like your varsity like in football and basketball and some of those other sports, like who your varsity guys, varsity
Yeah.
men and women are right off the bat. With track, the way in cross country, the way our coach ran it is if you were the number 2 or number 1 reserve, but you were faster than like the other runners, you were running varsity the next meet.
Oh, wow.
So he was always shifting. Now it was always because we wanted to win the overall meet,
Yeah.
and so it was fun. So I actually senior year ran varsity, so I was in cross country. It's top 7. So I was in the top 7 runners for varsity cross country, and then for some reason the 800, like what became my event in track my senior year, and don't know why, because the 800 is not a like I will fully state the 800 is not a distance race. It is an all out sprint for 2
Right.
laps, and it sucks.
Type
and
2 fun, right?
yeah, yeah, it's a different type of fun. But they put me in the 800, and I was actually one of those that I was like number 2 all the time, and then started dropping my senior year. And so I was like hovering 3-4. So the coach, I think he put me in the district meet just as like okay, just go ahead and run, because he didn't want to. The 4x800 team was solid,
Yeah.
and I didn't expect to. There was a field of 32 in 2 rounds, and the top 16 went to the finals, and I came in 15th out of 16, so I just barely qualified for the finals.
Right.
Um, the thing is, I get home. There was a day delay, so I get home. I'm on a rest, and I look at my dad, and I was looking at the times, and I'd run like a 2:13, and I was like, okay, like these guys I'm running against are all running sub 2. I was like, man, I'm not going to do well. And I won't forget, my dad looked at me and said, "You don't know and let yourself a shot.
Hmm.
So don't sell yourself short, because anything can happen."
Yeah.
Um, they start on we start on a stagger, and since I was 15, I was like row or lane 7 on the inside. And I remember when we start the stagger, the corner of my eye, I see like lane 1 and 2 starting to make up distance, and I'm like, I don't remember the rest of the race until we start coming around on the last lap.
Right.
And next thing I know is I can just hear everyone going nuts. And next thing I know, I'm picking guys off left and right.
That's
And
crazy.
it went from about 14th. It finished 8th in the race at a 2:07, and
Wow.
it was like,
And you'd never run a 207. No.
I haven't run a 2:07 since.
Magic
Um,
shoes. We didn't have magic shoes back then.
no, we didn't. We
No.
had like, you were lucky if you had like a 1/4 inch spike with like a plastic plate on the bottom of it.
Yeah. I
Um,
think I ran in Asics Tigers. I don't know why, because I thought they were a cool name. And I don't even remember having spikes or anything for outdoor track. I only ran
yeah,
once track. I was not a runner. It was like a ploy to put something on my college applications. But um, yeah, it took me a month to be able to run a mile nonstop. I remember I was
that,
going to go out for either cheerleading or running, and cheerleading was expensive. You had to buy shoes and a jacket, and I was going to call it a kit, but it's a skirt and whatever. And running, all you needed was a pair of running shoes, and I already had them. And I remember going out and running in my neighborhood, and my dad had gone out in the car and mapped out the distance in our blocks. So I knew how many blocks it was to do a mile, and it took me a month to be able to do that. And it was cold in upstate New York because I ran winter track, and I think we probably started in November. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
it was crazy. I was not an athlete growing up, so I'm glad you were. It's
uh,
interesting though. I was just having a conversation this morning with one of my, you made me think of something, with one of my coaching clients about an upcoming race. And I've said this to many athletes over the years, which is, you're not going to win with an attitude like that, right? And it sounds harsh, but the reality is, unless you actually can believe that you can do something, you're probably not going to do it. You have to, or you're just ready to throw it all out there, and who cares if you fail? Which I
yeah,
also think is a really good strategy for racers. It's like, what happens if you blow up? It's not the end of the world. It's an amateur race or a high school race or whatever. And you won't know unless you try. So, yeah, Maggie, we did have indoor track events. Although I remember, again, I was thinking as Brent was talking, this was my senior in high school. We didn't have an indoor track in high school. We ran around in the building. This must have been terrible on our legs. Um, on the slippery, tile-ish floor. We had a brand new high school, and I remember there was a big circle that went around basically what the auditorium was, and having to do these tight corners and
Yeah.
sliding and everything else. And so we trained indoors on, you know what school floors are like. They're concrete
Mhm.
underneath and they have this tile on top. And oh, it was awful. How I didn't, well, I probably did end up injured. So
Yeah, we had the same thing, and actually, it was one of those in the wintertime we had to run indoors, and then our uh, strength training was running up to the auditorium steps and then down the auditorium steps.
yeah.
Um, we got lucky that the coach actually found a pool that would take us. So, like, in order to prevent injury, every once in a while, like if someone was complaining about a shin or a knee, go to the pool,
And run or swim.
swim. But
Yeah.
the floaty belt and then swim. So it was actually a bunch of teenagers and a bunch of people, senior citizens, because it was a senior citizens thing, like running in
Yeah.
this pool together.
Yeah. Um, that's so cool. I can't believe you remember all these minute details of high school because I barely remember being in high school. That was a long time ago. Except I do remember I did run a half marathon, which is run is a generous term, I think. But between winter track and spring track, everybody did this half marathon in Mansfield, Pennsylvania. It was this big deal. And I was the only one who was a sprinter. And I was probably only a sprinter because that's all I could run. I couldn't run any further. And I was like, I'm in, probably because I wanted to go on the bus with the boys. I think that's what it was. And I missed all the Saturday long workouts because I was also a musician and we had, all state band and we had all these various things on the weekends. And I get to that marathon, half marathon, and all I remember are these ponies. Was probably out there for hours and hours and hours. And yeah, and I do remember not being able to walk for about a week and my mom putting me in a tub when I got home. It was just awful. But yeah, that was and then in the spring, they're like, "You're tall, you could do high jump and long jump," which is terrifying when I think about it now that I threw myself in the air over a pole and, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it
and,
was.
and hopefully land on the pad. But if you miss
Yes,
the mark by like 6 inches, and you're half on, half off the pad.
yeah. I'm shocked that I did it. We had the, state champion high jumper who graduated the year before, and she was the state champion long jumper, and they're like, "You're tall." I'm like, "That doesn't mean anything. I'm tall and not an athlete," but it was fun. And I found a photo of it this week. There was a photo on Facebook of me in my little track uniform. I was like, "Oh, that was cute." Yeah, mhm, yeah, good. So, anyways, so what took you from running? Did you continue to run for a while after high school?
I have run exactly one race since high school, and that was the Indianapolis Half Marathon. I did that at the end of my freshman year of college, and um, I'd say after that, I pretty much I stopped running. I got into intramural sports in college. It just one of those that like I kind of felt like I was done with that phase for a little bit. So,
Yeah,
um, and also college, got into I probably should have studied. I'm one of those ones that probably should have studied a little more. But college was a lot of fun.
right.
Um, so,
I
and
can
then really,
appreciate that.
yeah, yeah, probably a little too much fun in some cases.
Yeah.
But um, it and then professional life, and then my wife and I we actually met in 2003.
Right.
So in so it feels like Christine and I've been together practically every day since then.
Wow.
So um, I travel for work, and I've taken like one vacation with my dad in like '09, and that's the longest time that we've been apart. So
Good for
uh,
you.
yeah, it's it's worked for us. I mean, as with anything, it has its ups and downs. But then I didn't really get back into um, doing anything until about 2008. We moved to Montana, so it's actually one of the things that people put their location
Mhm.
on Peloton. And if you look at mine, it's Ohio, Montana, Washington, Virginia, Washington, and that's all the states that we've resided in.
Ah,
Um, so uh,
what industry are you in that you've moved so much?
I'm
Aerospace.
actually
No.
Yeah, I'm actually as a little shout out to Matt Welch. I'm in the building industry, so I'm a mechanical engineer.
Mhm.
So I've done HVAC system. So if you're one of my favorite movies and favorite movie quotes is J.K. Simmons in the movie Juno. And he goes, you got to find something that you're passionate about. I'm passionate about HVAC, and he just like goes off about HVAC and how he's passionate about it. And so basically just following which Montana doesn't make sense, but really got into energy and energy efficiency and sustainability and renewables. So instead of have a lot of projects up in Alaska where instead of burning gas or fuel oil, we actually burn wood and wood biomass. So the renewable systems and actually help a number of small communities up and down the Yukon to provide heat to some of their public and community buildings from a central heating system. So yeah, I mean, basically that's what's led to. I've been to Butte a few times, Maggie. We lived in Missoula, Montana, so it's the home of the University of Montana, home of the Grizzlies. We became adopted Grizz, so we have some friends that went to Montana State that live here in Seattle. So we're always like Grizz Cat Week when they play football or basketball. We're always jawing at one another. But
beautiful state.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I raced there in Whitefish this summer.
Whitefish. Yeah.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, you're about Whitefish is about 2 hours north of Missoula, and right next to Glacier. So
yes, and that's why it's popular. Apparently, it's more popular in the summer than the winter. Even though our race, we had to go through the ski resort, which was a major hike-a-bike. It was like you pushed the bike forward and held the brakes and pulled yourself forward, and then you pushed the bike forward and held the. I mean, it was that steep and that loose, and but apparently, it's much more popular in the summer because of Glacier than in the winter. But it was. Kalispell was the little town I was in.
Kalispell, yeah.
And pre-pandemic, they had 7,000 people, and now they have 14,000 people. So they have more restaurants and coffee shops now, and juice bars and all those things. Because I guess all the crazy Californians moved to Montana, including a couple of my friends who bought houses there. And but energy, that's interesting. So you've traveled a lot. How many states have you ridden your bike in?
Ridden my bike in.
Or a Peloton.
Or Peloton. Good. Peloton. About 25 states I've ridden a Peloton in.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and my wife always yells at me because when I'm traveling for work, the first thing I do is go onto the sites, different sites, and find out which hotels have Pelotons. Thank you that most Hiltons do, and I've had a Hilton Honors card since 2001, so like I can get points and jump on the bike. But
right.
So done that. Actually, ridden the bike. I have a hard time traveling, because I'm one of those travelers that like fit everything into the smallest suitcase possible. Well, the time you check in, engineer. Yeah, exactly.
My ex would go to Italy for 2 weeks with a backpack. Granted, his mother would do our laundry, but he would give me a hard time about checking a bag. I'm like, I have to bring all the dresses and the shoes. That me, of all people. And it was like, yeah, or the toiletries or the whatever. It's like, I can't travel with a pair of underwear and a shirt. Sorry.
Yeah. My wife and I are the same way. She packs I made a joke once that for like 1 week travel, she had the biggest suitcase that we had, and it was packed, and it was like pushing that 50-pound limit.
Right.
Before you have to pay. And mine was like a backpack.
Yeah.
And she looked at me and she goes, if you ever post anything like that again, don't even think about it. I have all this stuff. I have everything else that I need to bring. She's like,
right.
Guys, men are lucky. You have you can wear the same shirt for 6 days.
Yes. And the same shoes. It's like, oh, but these shoes don't, although I've learned white casual sneakers go with everything. In Italy, you can wear sneakers. In France, you can wear sneakers. You don't have to be fancy. But so where did the outdoor bike come into this? When did you start riding outside?
I got back to riding outside in 2008. It's actually the guy that sat next to me, the firm I worked at in Montana. He said, "Hey, I'm going to go out on a mountain bike ride. Do you want to go?" And so perspective, Ohio, like the tallest peak is somewhere around 2,000 feet.
Right.
The base elevation in Missoula is 3,000 feet. We'd been there for like 3 months, and I'm like, sure, I'll jump on a bike. Yes. So I got this rusted out, like rehab 10 speed, 30 33 on the front and I think like 55 or 33, 55.
Yeah.
So not even climbing gear. And I made it like 100 yards up the first hill. And I'm pushing the bike up. But
Was this a mountain bike?
oh yeah. Well,
Yeah, okay.
mountain bike.
Mountain bike. It was an old mountain bike, yeah.
Yeah. It was like the mountain bike I had as a kid. It was like a Murray or something like that. So
Yeah.
yeah. But we made it. I ended up hiking more than biking on that first ride. But then, and it took about an hour. We get up to the top of the hill, 5,500 feet. View was tremendous. From the top of Mount Sentinel in Missoula, and that view hooked me.
Yeah.
The initial hook. The second hook was I could do the downhill. We an hour up, 20 minutes down.
Right.
And it was like, okay, I'm 30 years old. I'm addicted to speed. Let's do this. So I ended up purchasing a specialized rock hopper, the '09 model. So it was a year ahead, and just spent those 6 years just like any moment I could. As soon as the weather broke, get out on a trail. And actually, where our office was, I could jump on my bike, jump on my bike, hit a trailhead in 10 minutes, go blast for an hour, and get back into the office. The uh, the fun things, like, so you go to like, this is what I classify as my worst wreck. My wife says it was until that one in last August. Is this trail I rode a number of times. I'm going on a downhill. There's a flat into like about a 15-foot drop that's the left right that opens up into a field. So I go down this drop, and there's a guy coming up the field, and the thought in my head was, hey, I'll get off. It's wide enough, but I'm going about 20, 22. I'll get off trail to let him go by because I don't have enough time to slow down, and it's not safe. I get off trail, and the next thing I know, I'm airborne. Don't know what happened. I hit the gravel and slide about 30 feet.
Ouch.
I look over, and I'm watching my bike bounce next to me. Finally stopped. I had a Camelback with my phone in it, and it was tracking my workout. And Lorri, I never forget this. Matt, my ride, stops as soon as I stop sliding and goes, workout paused. First thought going through my head was like, well, yeah, workout paused. I've like, did you record the slide?
Yeah.
The bike seat was bent back about 5 degrees. I snapped one of the pedal, like I had SPD clipless pedals, the Shimano SPDs. Sheared one side of one of them off. The rest of the bike was fine, but I was skinned elbow to wrist.
Oh yeah.
That's what was exposed. I go into work and they're like, did you get attacked by something? And I was like, no. I call Christine. It's like, hey, I had a little bike wreck, but I'm okay. Physically, I'm all right. I'm working with my arms like on the desk, like with paper towels underneath it to keep from like moving stuff everywhere. I get home and she looks at me and the eyes pop out of her head. She's like, you said it was a small wreck. She's like, well, how did you finish work in that condition?
Right. Deadlines. No.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. For those of you who aren't aware, in mountain biking, there's all kinds of rules of right of way because we often share trails with other other trail users, so horses and hikers, and then there's also rules of bikes. So the uphill rider has the right of way over the downhill rider because it's harder to start on an uphill. Although the e-bike community now is trying to switch that, which is very interesting because I know we don't need to share our love or our hate with e-bikes, but they exist and they're busy here. And it's like, but I'm still climbing. I need to, and a lot of folks during the pandemic, they started riding and they didn't have the influence of a club or a team or anything. And they don't realize that if you go to the trailhead, you can read the rules. And so a lot of folks don't understand the right of way rules when we're riding. And it gets a little sketchy, a little scary from time to time. But dirt. You got to scrub that stuff out, right?
Yeah.
Tegaderm is your friend. Tegaderm is like a saran wrap type bandage that we don't necessarily want to scab when we have road rash or trail rash because it'll cause scar tissue, and scar tissue changes your mobility. So it's like Tegaderm.
Yeah.
Everybody loves Tegaderm, wet wound healing. There was a product for years called Brave Soldier, which they made a bunch of different crash products. And I don't think they're around anymore, but they did have a wet wound healing page. And it was like, caution, caution, caution. Don't look at this content if you're eating breakfast or whatever, because yeah, it's in mountain biking, usually our crashes are not as significant, and everybody laughs when you crash in mountain biking because it's kind of part of what you do. It's not really violent crashing usually, but this sounds like it was pretty significant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think what happened is one of the tires came out of the quick
The
release because
rut.
when and
Oh,
the
yeah.
tire stopped, and engineer momentum, the,
Hmm.
the tire will stop, but it's just like everything else
Yeah.
is still going that quick.
Oh, it is.
Yeah. I just
And
kind of I can't figure out how I ejected myself out of the clips, though. That was interesting.
well, they're designed to do that because if they didn't, you would, you know, destroy a knee probably. So they're designed to be quick release in an emergency situation. But anyways, moving on. So at some point you get a road bike.
Yeah, I got a road bike. Actually, so we moved to Seattle, and I start biking into work, and then
Mhm.
so I actually switch out the tires on the mountain bike to road tires, which felt really odd. They were thicker. They were like 2.5-inch road tires. So
Yeah.
um, ended up I could feel something was wrong, and took it into the shop, and actually the frame stay, the chain stay was cracked, so the frame was cracked.
Ouch.
So ended up buying a road bike. Got into road biking. I was like, holy crap, I can actually ride quicker now than with this road bike than I could with that mountain bike. So
Oh yeah.
um, uh, I will say too, if you're in Seattle, if you ever visit Seattle or you're in Seattle, where we lived at the time was next to the Space Needle.
Uh-huh.
My office was in Georgetown, Soto area. So it's about a 5 mile commute, which 5 miles one way. But every morning, if you go to Pike's Place Market and stand at the top of First Ave and look down, that was my morning ride in.
Burr.
And my,
That's
my
cold.
it was cold
Going down.
and wet a lot. But then the ride home was going up that same hill.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of climb, and to your point earlier, a lot of start stop because
Hmm.
cars are really good in Seattle. But if you've got a red light as a cyclist, that's
Oh
your sign to stop. So
yeah.
um, I won't forget. It was one day. It was like 95, middle of summer, and I'm going up the hill, and I get stopped at a red light right in front of Pike's Place Market, and this woman comes up to me, and I'm shooting some water, and she looks at me. She goes, "You're gonna need more to drink than that, baby." I was like, well, okay.
She was in a car
No,
or
she
on
was
a
just
bike.
pedestrian walking in
Oh
front of me.
yeah. Yeah. So
Say
at
get
some
over.
point you started doing long distance riding.
Yeah, actually, I downloaded recently because I wanted to see. Peloton got me into a lot more of the long distance riding.
Yeah.
And I was like Matt said a few times, people start like 20, 30 minutes. You're like, oh God, 30 minutes. This is now you're up to like 2 hours, and you're like, 30 minutes is a warm up now.
Yeah.
So got into long distance riding, and then we moved to Virginia in 2021. It really got into like flat, long 50 mile rides.
Hmm.
Ended up selling the bike that I had. It was a Trek Dual Sport for a Trek domain, and just freaking loved the thing.
Nice.
Uh, I think I put a picture up in the Wilpers chat where it was me on the Peloton in my corporate kit with my helmet on, saying, "Okay, I'm ready for spring to start." Um,
Nice.
yeah, I don't ride with fenders because I don't trust them. I've seen fenders get folded into a thing, and um, I, I feel like I'm a little too old to be riding in the rain and cold that we have
How
here.
old are you?
47.
Yeah.
Um,
Ancient. No.
I, I've got a friend here it was an avid cyclist. I think he was up to like a Cat 2 back in his 20s.
Yeah.
And talking to Seth when we moved back, and he goes, "Do you still ride in the rain?" And I'm like, "Man, I just
Yeah.
can't." Seth's about my age, and he is my age, and he looks at me and he goes, and Seth and I would meet at work all the time from riding in, and and he looks at me and he goes, "I haven't ridden in the rain in the last 2 years.
Yeah. Which is hard where you live. Where we live, until the last few years when we started getting winters, you could ride every day of the year, basically. We might get 4 or 5 days a year of rain, and Californians are definitely not rain riders. It's like, oh, the ground is wet. We're not going to ride today. And it's like, okay, but because you the next day it's going to be nice. So that's
Yeah.
usually our take. But now we get real winter. We get Seattle winter down here, it seems like. And yeah, but I'm like there are so many great indoor training options that when you think about having to clean the bike and being cold and wet and the chance of slippery pavement or drivers who are inattentive in the rain and that because we also can't drive in the rain here in California. Coming from
They,
upstate New York, I was like, really? You don't know how to drive in the rain? What
they
would you
can't
do in snow?
yeah, they can't in Seattle either. And it
Yeah.
rains, we'll say it rains all the time from October till about May. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So maybe people just don't know how to drive anymore. But yeah, it is addictive. And when people first start riding, they go longer and longer and longer and longer. And then eventually, usually we start to try to climb more or go faster. There's so many different ways to ride. Um, and it was interesting because I had someone who had asked me about this, which is how do you not get bored riding a bike? You've had the same hobby for almost 30 years. And I'm like, and it's my job. And I'm like, well, you do different things, right? So I'll have years where I ride more gravel and years where I do big road events and I've raced road and mountain bike and all these various things. And I just keep reinventing myself. So like the Madonna of bikes.
Yeah.
And it keeps it exciting and different and interesting usually. And then when I got really bored, I started running instead for a few years and came back to the bike and it was like, oh, it's like going back to your ex, but better. So they
Yeah.
don't talk back. The bike doesn't talk back. But yeah. So you utilize the Power Zone training to prepare for the outdoor events.
I do. And actually, I joined the Team Wilpers group in September. I was written,
Yeah.
so it's like the first formalized training I've had since I stopped running in like 96.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of it was like, okay, a lot of it was my own hubris. I mean, I'm an engineer. Yeah, I know how to do this stuff. I did it
Right.
before. Holy smokes, it has changed so much.
Yeah.
The training has changed so much. And I think what I really found was like that structure and craved having that structure and having that like, okay, I know what my goal is. I can state what my goal is.
Hmm.
And then here's this program that like absolutely will get you to that goal. We have a friend of ours and his son or their brother was going to ride the STP with their dad, and their dad's an avid outside cyclist.
Yeah.
Um, the son was like, I'm going to ride like twice a week on my indoor bike, and he's like, I barely made the first day. And I
Yeah.
was talking to our friend's dad, and he goes, "Well, how much are you riding?" And I said, "Well, I just did like 2 hours and 40 some miles on the Peloton inside." And he this is Christmas time, and he goes, "You'll be fine."
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and it's one of those that like to your point, how do you not get bored with things?
Right.
Um, having that team and having either it's Team Wilpers or the Power Zone Pack, or you can see like the different hashtags that are out there
Hmm.
and people like high-fiving one another. I mean, that's like that a little adrenaline shot every time you
Right.
see a high five. And it's one of those that like, okay, that's what keeps it fun. It's not just you cranking in a room by yourself with a fan on,
Right.
um, or with the heater on to simulate summer training.
Yeah. Be careful about that. I
Yeah,
know. Lots of people want to acclimatize, right? We'll talk about that as we get closer to summer because it's a big deal,
yeah,
acclimatizing to heat and also to altitude. Like I did that event in Montana and I literally live at sea level. I live at the beach while I'm upstairs. So maybe I'm what, 50 feet up?
like
Who
15
knows?
feet.
Yeah. But yeah, acclimatizing to heat is a big deal. But the risk of training in the heat can be pretty significant. So we have to, because of recovery and everything. So we have to be careful
Yeah,
with that. But one of the things I do tell folks is, we are in our insulated bubbles all the time. Well, open your windows. Don't use your air conditioning. Don't use the air conditioning in the car. And which is miserable, right? Because we're so spoiled now. We didn't have air conditioning in cars when I was a kid.
yeah,
We
yeah.
sweat,
And sorry,
but we don't know how to
yeah.
sweat anymore.
No, that's people like me's fault for giving us this nice indoor climate that we want to that
Oh,
people
yeah,
don't want
that's
to
true.
leave.
Thank you,
Yeah,
HVAC world. Yeah, it is very true. But yeah, I think, and it was funny because there was a ride yesterday where I think it was Suzanne was posting like her blow by blow of each of the sets of intervals. And I was like, it was hard. And she was getting in the chat, she was doing this. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. And at the platform that I use, we have online chat in the platform, which is great
Mhm.
because we can do coaching and we can get to know each other in the social aspect. Because even outdoors, I think the social aspect is very important. There are lots of people who ride because that's their social life. Those are their friends. And yeah, so it's
Yeah,
good.
and that's what I love too about the power zone trainings because they do equate it to like zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, all the
Mhm.
way up to 7. And I'm able to look at like an outside ride where I'm having a chat with a buddy and we're just like cruising through it, and it's like, okay, yeah, this is like easy zone 2 type stuff.
Mhm.
And then like when we want to get after it, it's like, okay, now I'm stepping up into zone 3, and now the sentences are like 3
Yeah.
words and that's it.
Yeah.
So it it does really equate well to distance running with the way the program and has set it up.
Mhm. And I think, paying attention to how you feel in each of those zones and then relating it to outside is really important. So, understanding what is my all-day pace? What is my and that's a hard one for people because we start out riding as hard as we can all the time, and then as you go longer and longer, you realize that's not sustainable for a whole day. So,
Yeah,
and making
yeah.
that jump. Now, what's your longest ride to date? Have you
Longest ride. I haven't done a century yet. So
Okay.
longest ride today is 51 miles.
Aha.
Uh,
Okay.
so um, uh, part of that is just because I really the thing that I'm really getting into now and did for most of the last year was the nutrition on the
Right.
ride,
Mhm.
and making sure that you're like getting those calories during the ride.
Yeah.
Um, so started getting into the gels, and actually I've got a bar in my bag, a rice bar. It's got protein in it. I'll just say that the added strength that we've done in week 2 so
Yeah.
far, um, I have neglected strength for too long,
Yeah.
and was feeling. I walked in with a coworker and they go, "How you feeling?" I'm like, "I'm sore."
Yeah. That
So
goes away, which is
yeah,
good.
it goes. Yeah.
But I
Uh,
raced this past weekend. I do strength training on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I worked with my coach yesterday. And I credit her for how well I did in the race this past weekend. It was miserable. It was every kind of mud you could imagine. And it was a 60-ish mile gravel race and about 50-50 gravel and pavement. Last year I did it in under 4 hours. I finished second overall. This year it took me about almost 6.5 hours because of the mud. And I was able to ride things though that other people weren't. And I think it was because of the strength training, not just the legs, but the upper body,
yeah,
because you're maneuvering the bike and trying to keep it upright. And doing that while you're going at a very low speed. And a lot of people aren't comfortable riding at low speed. And I was able to, just manhandle the bike. And through the mud, I mean, I was in my easiest gear, but it felt like I was doing a million leg presses. And I finished. I wasn't sore. Everybody else who had finished in our group, I was there with a large group of athletes, and they were like, "Oh my god, my triceps," by halfway through. My triceps were killing me or my back was killing me or whatever, and I was like, I was able to ride it all except this one section toward the end, and if I had been smart and not used my ego, I would have paid attention to what was going on, but there were all these guys. There was a lake, and it was a what looked like just another section of kind of muddy trail, and they were all standing on the side, and I wasn't really paying attention to what they were doing, and they were cleaning the mud out of their bike, which I have a lot of clearance on my bike, and some people don't, tire clearance, so I wasn't getting clogged up, and I thought, oh, I can ride this. Well, had I paid attention, I would have realized that it was clay, and I made it about probably 20 feet, and then the bike completely came to a stop, and I was going slow enough, it didn't knock me off or anything, but then I had to, with my hands, pull the mud out of the bike in order to roll it, and if I'd been smart, I would have paid attention and not try to ride it at all and just put the bike on my shoulder and walked or run, because it wasn't even it was long enough, but it was a new section of the course. They had changed the ending of the course, so last year, like, the last 13 miles were this fast paved section, and now we're in the mud again, and oh my god, it was just dreadful, but the strength training made a huge difference, so, um I've said that throughout this training cycle is getting outside and doing the 4 and 5 hour rides because my back is strong, because my core is strong, and everything feels great. And that's not always the way that you feel when you get on the bike and you're feeling your upper body, you're feeling your shoulders or your back or whatever. So it was significant and getting a lot of good feedback about this. We have a
Yeah.
lot of folks doing the strength, and that's great. And it's been curated specifically for this program, which I think is also awesome. But yeah, you're going to feel some DOMS, some delayed onset muscle soreness, and some fatigue, and that's okay.
Yeah.
We know that will go away after a couple of weeks, and you're still getting the gains, but your body just is not used to doing the strength work. So that'll be good. So,
Yeah.
what is
And
your plan to ramp up for Seattle?
so for the STP, the plan to ramp, get work through this cycle. By the time we hit the end of this in April, actually when you use the Pelafondo is like, okay, I pledged
Oh, yeah.
75 miles. I want to see if I can get that done indoors in a day.
Yeah.
Um, so do that, and then really by the time we get end April, really start hitting the outside.
Yeah.
We've got with our group. There's a couple of I will say it's all guys. So if I'm saying guys, it's because
It's
it's
okay.
it's all
Um,
dudes. We do need to get some females involved here, but when we moved back, when we lived in Virginia, my coworkers had a cycling channel.
mhm.
So it was like we were all like coordinating rides and going out and mountain bike rides, cyclocross, road riding. When I moved to Seattle, I was like, okay, what's the cycling group that we got here? And they're like, what cycling group?
Oh.
So I was like, crap. So started a group chat channel. It started with 3. We're up to 16. We've got
Oh,
people
good.
that do same stuff, cyclocross, mountain bike, and coordinate rides. We've got some of our younger people in their 30s are going out now and getting 50 some miles in. So I'll be
Yeah.
jumping in with them to get some of those rides in on Saturday. To one of the points that you've made, a lot of people go on long rides Saturday and Sunday. So
Yeah.
Saturday and
Get
Sunday
those
long
back to
ride.
back rides. And even
Yeah.
if you can, there's some holiday weekends coming up. If you can do some 3 days where you get like 4 hours each day, um,
Yep.
they don't have to be super long. They're clearly not going to be super hard, but just getting that consistent block of training. I did one of those prior to this race. I did what was supposed to be a 4 day block, but I did a 3 day block, and it was significant. And I was able to recover, which was good, but it was like 300 TSS on Saturday. And I think I had another 250 TSS on Sunday and then another 200 on Monday. And they were all different nature rides. Some were road, and I think 2 were dirt, 1 was road. But it was a big block and my body was ready for the longer distance. So that's the key. And I would say think in time, not necessarily miles, and small increments as you increase. And you can even add a little on the weekends now, but we do have some pretty good, I was looking at the plan this morning. This is the highest volume I think we've done in any of our plans with this 5 ride plan, doing the longer rides and also doing a harder ride on Sundays, which, right, it's a little shorter, but it's harder. So,
But
yeah,
a little shorter, it definitely works different spots.
yeah.
I'll say like I've definitively found that from mountain biking where you're doing more like of a grind sometimes. The higher RPM
Hmm.
definitively helps on a climb.
Yeah.
Legs spinning. I did cheat, and I know we'll get into it. I did cheat and look at week 3 already, and
You can look at week
really,
3.
yeah, I looked at week 3. Really pumped for Saturday's ride, but I'm not going to say what that was, so we'll wait for that.
It's okay because it's up. It should have launched on the platform yesterday, and
Yeah,
yeah, it'll be good. So definitely, and reach out if you need any help planning your progression. But definitely, I would get up to being able to do 4 or 5 hours a day because depending on your pace. I mean, the nice thing about STP is it's mostly group riding.
yeah,
It's just like big packs and big packs and big packs, and so yeah,
yeah,
that's awesome. So, um, so one other reason why I was drawn to Brent was the fact that we share something in common is we're both sober individuals, which I just found out this week, I think. Um, so tell me that part of your story. I don't talk about it very often. I'm not one of those beat you over the head with sobriety people, but for me, it was a choice a little over 13 years ago. It was like the only choice for me. I was like, if I didn't stop drinking, I was going to stop being. So it's made a huge difference in my life and my life as an athlete. Um, how did you come to sobriety?
Yeah, it actually had a bit of loss in our lives, actually. So my grandfather, my mom's dad, died at 71. He had cirrhosis. My dad's dad
Mm,
died shortly after that. I mean, very kind of young when you really look
mhm.
at it. My parents are well into their 70s, almost as old as our Raquel.
Yeah.
And they've taken care of themselves. So, but they grew up with that and that culture. My father-in-law had liver cancer, died in 2011, and it was a lot of it. So there was that aspect of it. And as I got older, it was one of those that like, okay, where do I want to be?
Hmm.
Moving forward, where do I want to be? Not like next year, but where do I want to be in like 10 years and 15 and 20 years? So I actually did an experiment where I did a dry October in 2015. And scientist slash engineer, you only change one variable and see what happens.
Right.
So um, I didn't change my eating habits, which weren't great. But the only thing didn't change my exercise habits. Um, but I dropped 11 pounds
Wow.
in 31 days.
Yeah.
And the only thing I changed was that. And I said, okay, I'm not like, maybe I'm going a little too hard on the weekends. Maybe, I'm not cutting back. And this was 4 years after my father-in-law died. Um, four, 24 years after my grandfathers had died. So like, okay, I need to shift here.
Hmm.
Um, really started cutting back. And what ended up happening, it's not something that happened overnight. I mean, it's just like exercise. It took time. There were times when I definitively would have too much on a Saturday because of whatever reason
Hmm.
during that time period. And then finally, like I went to my wife and I started noticing that anytime I would like even drink something small, I would get red,
Oh,
rashy, hot, itchy, and you could actually see it like coming up my neck, and it
yeah.
felt like it was coming up over my neck and over my head. So I go in and talk to my normal checkup and talk to my doctor, and she gives the scientific term, and I just look at her and said, "Can you give it to me in English, please?" And she goes, "What essentially happened is I had cut back to a point where my body had stopped processing alcohol."
Yeah.
Uh, so that was actually pure alcohol running through my system, and they did say you can keep drinking if you want to. Just know that every time you do that, you're going to have this reaction.
Yeah.
And one of those like, do I want to put up with this reaction? Because that was the thinking back in. This was in 2018. So actually, March 9th, 2018, I was like, I can tell you the restaurant in Seattle, Tavolata, great Italian restaurant if you're here. There's a few of them. Um,
Son.
yeah,
I know.
didn't
I have
really give me a
skylights
right in the eyes.
everywhere. I know. And I'm like, where can I go to get away from the sun? Anyways, sorry. So
Anyway,
Tavola.
yeah. So Tavolata, bartender, we knew pretty well, and there was a drink that was off the menu, and I said, okay, this is. Told my wife, and she's very supportive. This is my last one, and
Yeah.
I ordered that in March 9th, 2018. That was it. And actually, I talked to her and my parents, and they both said the same thing because we had my mom's dad had a tradition of green beer on St. Patrick's Day because we're part
Right.
Irish.
Yeah.
There's actually pictures of me with like a little mini shot glass at the tender age of like 4 or 5. It's not like I was like drinking a full beer, but just like a little shot of it.
Yeah.
And I said, uh, what would Grandpa think? And my Christine and my parents all said he'd rather you be happy and be around than continue on with that tradition.
Yeah.
Um, so that was it. It's there are times that the job I work at and jobs I've worked at are pretty stressful.
Yeah.
It's pretty intense, and there's times when it's like, holy smokes, yeah, there whiskey was my whiskey and beer were my drinks of choice, and it was one of those that like, yeah, I see something too, and it's still like, hey, yeah, that looks good, and it's been a week, but actually, there's a little divey pizza place here. We got to know the bartender pretty well, and I was joking around with Beth once, and I said, "Yeah, let's just go order a drink." And she looks at me and she goes, "If you ever order a drink, I'm going to ask you what's wrong."
Yeah.
Uh, so it's say in part of that progression, I did notice I eat a lot more sugar than I used to. Still addicted to sugar.
Alcohol or sugar.
Yeah, there's
It
a
is
lot of
definitely
sugar.
one of those. There's addiction transference as well as a
Mhm.
concept in the addiction world, which means there's that dopamine hit basically that you get.
Yeah.
And with a lot of folks, myself included, I'm one of those people. Moderation is not in my dialogue. Um, not even on the bike, not even for anything I do. It's like, oh, you're the kid that can eat one cookie. I'm the one who eats the whole package. So I've had to learn tools how to manage all of that. And alcohol was the same thing. It was like, yeah, I wasn't because I didn't have the same dopamine response that other people have. And understanding that I think is important. It's like for me, the only way not to want to drink more is not to drink at all. And my father was an alcoholic. Both my sisters were alcoholics. It's like I was kidding myself for a long time that I could moderate and I would stop for long periods of time and I would always go back. But I think this time it stuck, 13 years and change and no desire whatsoever to drink. And I would imagine I would have the same response that you did from a little bit of alcohol. I can't even imagine drinking at this point. I think it would make me quite sick. And but sugar, the same thing. If I have too much sugar, I get that same response. I get, the flushed, the flushy feeling of having too much that my body can't process. So it's amazing what our body can do. And it's also amazing when our body, if we listen, will tell us what's probably not good for us. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And keep in mind too, it's a journey, and it
Oh yeah.
does take sobriety, and it's a life. Once you make that decision, it's a lifelong journey. I look at it as, so I started drinking. Mentioned earlier, had too much fun in college.
Right.
That was, there was a lot of that. I will say one of the things that did pull me out of some of that in one of those phases where I cut back through college. I joined a fraternity, which sounds kind of like counterintuitive, but those brothers and the brother, I have two sisters,
Yeah.
so I didn't grow up with brothers. So it was me and dad and then mom and two sisters. But those men, they like really, and even our chapter advisor, they really like drove home and gave me something to work for,
Good.
that like put that part on the side.
Yeah.
So we did have our fun. We had a lot of fun. We were a social fraternity, but yeah, moving forward, and now it was like I look at that. So at 19, so 0 to 19, plus now 7 years. I'm 47. Over half of my life now not drinking. Is like, you know what? I can keep pushing forward, one day at a time, one foot at a time.
Yeah.
My dad always said, and it was his high school motto: one step at a time, as long as it's forward.
Ah.
So
I
he
have
said,
backward steps sometimes. It's like,
"Oh
oh,
yeah,
those cookies. But at the end of the day, it's like I choose to be healthy and
yeah,
I choose to be here and present. And lots of folks, they're like, how do you go to a wedding or how do you, and it's like, you just choose. And these days, I think it's a lot easier. But um, I would say if anyone is sober curious, I always let folks know this. I'm always happy to chat. And there are a couple of really good Peloton groups. When I was riding the Power Zone Pack Challenges, I was part of the Sober Squad, and they high five everybody, and they take great pleasure in passing those on the leaderboard with wine and whiskey and beer in their names. So, Pelo Vino, yeah, boom, you're going down. So some good groups. So if anyone is listening and curious, I'm happy to chat, and I bet Brent is too. So yeah,
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely."
Anyways, we've been talking a long time. This is great. We're going to do a rapid fire round. You want to go first or you want me to go?
Sure, sure.
Okay, you go.
Yeah. I did prep a few of them. I'll start
Good.
off with the controversial one first. Pineapple on or off pizza?
Oh, you know what? On. I know.
This might be
I had a piece of pizza yesterday and I got Pizza My Heart is like the California pizza brand and they do a Maui Wowie. And I was like, that looks really good. But it's the sugar.
Yeah, it's a sugar. I might say this would be where we end the live stream.
I know. That's okay. I own up to it.
And we all have our things. So
Yeah. Okay, what's next?
um, Elvis or the Beatles?
Beatles.
Beatles. Okay. Um, Espresso or drip coffee?
Espresso.
Pancakes or waffles?
Waffles.
Uh,
I like
50.
putting the butter in the
Yeah, the butter in there, but there's just something about like a pancake, just like pulling the syrup into it. It
Oh,
just
that's true.
yeah. Um, I understand that this is also very controversial for people that are in California. Queso, real cheese or not?
Oh, I have no idea.
So then guac or queso?
Guac.
Guac.
Definitely guac. Yeah, I'm not a dairy person anymore either. There's as you age, there are certain things that your life doesn't involve anymore. And for me, it's like eggs, rice, and dairy. None of them work for me anymore. Red meat.
Yeah.
So yeah.
My gallbladder came out in 2019, and a byproduct, I can't eat scrambled eggs anymore. I can eat eggs if it's
Oh.
baked in something, but
Yeah.
so every breakfast is like we go out for breakfast, and it's like I'll have the oatmeal.
Yeah. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Any more?
Last one: beach
Okay.
or mountains?
Uh, uh, mm, I have them both here. I would say mountains.
Mountains.
Hmm. But I don't live in the mountains here because the fires. So I chose the beach instead. My second favorite place. Anyways, my turn. Favorite
Yeah.
Peloton instructor.
Favorite Peloton instructor? Ooh,
Doesn't have to
uh,
be me.
it's one of those that like Matt would be like number one, but I love Adrian Williams.
Oh, good. So do the girls. There's something about Adrian. Everyone loves Adrian. Power Zone Endurance, Power Zone, or Power Zone Max?
Endurance all day long.
Good. Would you rather train in the morning, midday, or evening?
The Pacific Coast or Pacific Coast Crusaders. I forget what we call ourselves.
Crushers.
Crushers. 6 a.m. in the morning, every
Oh,
morning.
good. Good, good, good. There are lots of folks, right? The 5 a.m. club, the folks that believe that get it done.
Yeah.
Climb a mountain or ride into a headwind?
Oh, am I climbing the mountain on a bike?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Climb a mountain.
Okay. Last one. Shorts or bib shorts?
Bib shorts.
We don't have to end. That's good.
Not even a
Anyway,
question.
yeah. I'm going to wrap up. Welcome to Intensity, everybody. Obviously, this week included some really intense rides, as I saw from all your reactions. That's good. Short, but intense. I would say resist the urge to add more. Let yourself do the work, especially if you're doing the strength training, right? So we've got our intensity, we've got our strength training. Figure out your rhythm of what goes where in your day. They don't have to be together. You can do one in the morning, one in the evening, one in the morning, one at lunch. You can do them together. Do you do your strength first or your riding first? Everybody's a little different. Matt and I disagree on that. I always do my strength first because I feel like that's my weakness. And if I ride first and I'm fatigued, I don't do as well. Matt always does his sport first and then does the strength training. So um, we have more intensity next week, which is good. And we've got some back-to-back longer rides on the weekend. So preparing for, especially for those of you who are going to do some outdoor events. This will get you ready for that. Recovery is super important. So we've got one more intense week. Make sure you keep the quality high quality. Take your days off. Take your recoveries. And the next week you get in week 4 you get a little break, so we'll go back to do some endurance. I know, which is good, right? But yeah, I think that's about it. And I know Maggie is organizing a Pelofondo team, so if you're planning on Pelofondo, what I would say is start increasing your duration now. Don't just jump in and try to do 200 miles in a weekend when you've never done that. Start adding on to your weekend rides, but keep it nice, easy endurance. Zone 2, it's fine to ride zone 2. Anyways, that's about it. So Brent, thank you. See, that wasn't that bad, was it?
No, Lorri and I were talking beforehand a little bit yesterday, and it was one of those that like I'm incredibly nervous about this, but more like nervous fun. It's almost like that scene from Armageddon's like 60% nervous, 40% excited, or is it
Right.
the other way around? So no, this was a lot of fun, and thank you everybody for being here, and thank you for the opportunity, Lorri.
Yeah. And thank you for the stoke. I always appreciate when people appreciate what we do. So awesome. Everybody have a great week. I will see you next week from Spain. I have to figure this out how I'm going to do this, but I'll be in Spain next Friday. Have a great day.